It's Hater Sensei, Grandmaster Chosen One, Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to another edition of Q&A with the Coach. Shout out to the channel sponsors, X-Martial, formerly known as NoGiBJJGear.com. Same great no-gi equipment, but they also now offer combat sports equipment for other combat sports. Go check them out. Use my code Ramsey10 for 10% off everything as always. And also thanks to Relks Bit, makers of fine, high-powered massage guns. Links and discount code in the description below. Now on to the questions. Our friend The End is Near says this: how can I send you a question, Ramsey? Well, my friend, you already did. That is a question. If anyone's still confused, because I get this question, how can I send you a question, Ramsey? In the comments of virtually every video I put out, just leave your questions in the comments down below. I read your comments. I know that shocks a lot of people because many YouTubers don't. But yeah, man, I read your comments. I'm even reading one right now. So, on with the other questions. Our friend Josh in Jesus says, you should make a video about how to fight southpaws who have a major size advantage. This seems like a very specific request. Is there a big southpaw at your gym who's picking on you and you just can't seem to find his number at any particular time of the day when you're sparring with him and he's just beating you up? Is that what's happening? That's what it sounds like, because that's oddly specific. But let's go on. It seems a nearly impossible task for the average guy, because when a big guy fights southpaw, you usually have to go deep into his reach in order to land anything meaningful. You got a long way to go to get into his reach, and you got a long way to go to get back out of his reach. Plenty of time for him to land a power shot or slam you or anything. Slam you. So, first I thought maybe you were talking about boxing, but now we're introducing slams, so I guess you're talking about MMA. All right, Josh, the reason I'm not going to answer this question in the gym with a pragmatic demonstration of this is how you fight a southpaw, this is how you fight a southpaw who is bigger than you, is because there is not just nuance in answering that question, but there is an incredible variety of variability in how to approach that. The answer to that question is going to be as different as the individual that you're sparring or fighting. So the answer to your question is pretty simple. Spend a lot of time sparring with bigger people, spend a lot of time sparring with southpaws, and spend a lot of time sparring with southpaws who are bigger than you. And you will notice that the answer to that puzzle is different for each one of them. Now, there are some general guidelines when fighting opposite stance, orthodox versus southpaw. There are some general guidelines when fighting a larger, stronger opponent. But as soon as you spend even a little bit of time trying to figure out different kinds of people that fit that same bill, large, southpaw, you're going to learn the answer is different for each and every one of them. Some of those guys may be complete pushovers, and some of them may just knock you around however they want on the mat. Yeah, I know it's not the answer you wanted, but it's the answer you need. And you might be thinking, well, there's no other big southpaws at my gym. But you need to understand this. Not every big southpaw fights like that guy that's giving you trouble. They're all different. Radically different. Importantly different. You have to respect that. Next question. Today, Boris asks, how dangerous can a Mormon be? How dangerous can a Mormon be? Well, Boris, my friend, we will fight to the death for our God, for our religion, for our countries, for our families, for our wives, for our children. And with the God of Israel on our side, we shall prevail. But otherwise, we're pretty chill. Next question. Our next question comes from I am 10SA147 or something like that. who says, could you do a tutorial on how to grow a beard? That would be very cool. It would be really cool if you braided your beard like a Viking. A tutorial on how to grow a beard. Okay. Step 1. Have hair follicles that grow hair out of them on your face. It helps if you're a man, but there are some women out there capable of growing facial hair. Most can't. A very few can. But, step 1, be a person who can grow facial hair. Step 2, wait. Step 3, don't cut your facial hair off. And there you go. Beard, like magic. Now, if you don't meet step 1, then I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to grow a beard. I get so many comments about my beard. I don't have a beard right now. I got some scruff on my face. I shaved 2 days ago with a razor, and now I got this going on. I generally shave off my beard every 3 weeks, and I get a bunch of comments because of this. So many comments about facial hair and appearance on this channel. What happened to your beard? Which tells me this person has been watching this channel for less than 3 weeks. Yeah, every 3 weeks or so it comes and it goes. Don't overthink it, man. There's no thinking involved in growing facial hair. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend Rizix. A lot of Z's and X's in that name. Basically, he's a, or she, I don't know, is a younger practitioner of Jiu-Jitsu, a white belt, rolling with a yellow belt. Again, they're both kids, like under 15, and a yellow belt is basically like a one-stripe white belt. And Rizix explains it like this. Now, as the role progressed, he, the yellow belt, seemed to become almost angry that he hadn't submitted me yet, and even added the comment that he beat my friend before the roll. And around the end of the roll, I got him in a footlock, kind of like a headlock, or, okay, I know what a footlock is, right? And he hadn't tapped, so I slowly continued to crank it further until it popped, and then I freaked out. And I looked at him and asked if he was okay, and he said he was fine in a kind of angry tone. So I asked why he didn't tap, and he shrugged it off and walked out of the class, and I haven't seen him train since. Okay. I'm wondering if he's injured, and if I shouldn't have continued with the submission, it being clear he had an ego and wouldn't tap easily. What's your take on this? Okay. Rizix, yeah, okay, I read your question, I hear what you're saying, and there are a lot of folks in the Jiu-Jitsu world who will instantly poo-poo and wag their fingers if they hear you're doing footlocks or leg locks of any type. Even though the straight ankle lock is perfectly IBJJF legal. Now, there are at least 2 ways to finish a straight ankle lock, and by finish I don't mean different positions or setups, I mean actual body mechanics behind the finish. There's essentially the Achilles lock, where you are applying pressure with the radius bone right here against the soft tissue in the Achilles tendon. And that one hurts a lot. That one gives plenty of fair warning for the guy to tap out. And the end game of that one is to snap the shin in half. Got to put a lot of oomph into that, a lot of stress and power with your hips like a deadlift. But that is the end game of a straight ankle lock done as a Achilles lock. The other variation, the other body mechanic, is where you actually twist the ankle itself. And it's a very subtle difference. So from an outside, if you're not familiar with the difference, you might not see it. But that's the footlock where the ankle will actually pop. Again, the goal of that one is to essentially sprain the ankle on purpose. And then you got heel hooks, which are to tear up the knee bars, to bend the knee backwards, calf cranks to tear up the calf, and so on, right? It sounds like what you were probably doing was a straight ankle lock where you're twisting the ankle itself, okay? If you heard a pop and the leg didn't snap in half, right? Now, I'm not going to wag my finger at you and say, no, you shouldn't do leg locks. No, train leg locks, absolutely. Train leg locks. And before anybody says they're too dangerous or too dangerous for younger people to train, If you use the same precautions that you should use with any submission, which is err on the side of caution, and if you're rolling with somebody too stubborn to tap out, just let go and try for something else. Like, here, I'll see if I can pull up this clip of me sparring with my student Nick when he was basically brand new to Jiu-Jitsu, basically totally brand new to grappling. He didn't know much about grappling at all. He had a bit of kickboxing experience, but this was one of my first sparring sessions with him where we did any grappling. And I put myself in position a bunch of times to finish a heel hook, and I grab his heel and I hold on to it in the position to finish, but I don't crank on it. You'll notice instead I'll let go and I'll keep rolling. I'll try for something else. Because I know I can catch him with that ankle lock at any moment. Sorry, the heel hook at any moment. But I want to learn something. I want to get something out of this experience. And snapping his ACL is not going to teach him anything. Well, it might teach him, okay, that's a bad position, and then he won't be able to train again, and he may never come back. And I could stop the roll and give him a whole lecture about this is a heel hook, and this is what it does, whatever. I want to take advantage of that 5 minutes that I'm sparring with him so that I can learn something, and so that he can learn something, so we can both get experience, so we can both get mat time. Okay. If you were going for an arm bar, and you're in a position where you know you can snap that guy's arm in half, right? And you're pulling on that arm, you're hyperextending his elbow, you're thrusting those hips into it, and he isn't tapping out. Most of us in the Jiu-Jitsu community know, okay, I'm not going to break my training partner's arm, even though maybe he's kind of a jerk and whatnot, just because he's being stubborn. I'm not going to break his arm, right? Most people are much less experienced with leg locks, and so they don't necessarily know when to err on the side of caution. They don't necessarily know when to let go. So you might feel like I did something wrong because this guy isn't coming back. Maybe he's injured. Maybe I hurt him. I feel bad about that. I get it. I get it. And I certainly don't want to make you feel any worse than your conscience makes you feel, because your conscience is teaching you something, teaching you what to do next time. And this is going to happen, sometimes accidentally. I had a training partner who had a surgery on his ACL, and he came back to the gym, wanted to roll with me, and it was his first time rolling after recovering from surgery. And so we're rolling, and his ACL snaps again. And I felt like, oh man, this is all my fault, I'm a jerk. Now, I wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. I wasn't trying to attack his knee. I wasn't doing any heel hooks. He was just trying to pass my guard. But on the way, snap. It can and does happen. Now, as much as possible, we want to minimize the injuries. Okay? So, if you're really concerned about this guy, contact him. Contact him directly. We live in an amazing age of information. Even when I was a kid, we had this fascinating thing called a phone book, which some of you keep telling me that you would listen to me read. I don't know why. You would want to hear me read a list of names and numbers from a phone book. But we had this thing called a phone book, and you could look up people's phone numbers and then give them a call and say, hey, how are you doing? I noticed you're not in class lately. Is it because I messed up your ankle? If so, I'm really sorry about that. What can we do to make this right? Try that. See what happens. And, worst case scenario, maybe he's still too prideful to admit, yeah, you got me. Because what is Jiu-Jitsu, essentially? Jiu-Jitsu is a contest of Jiu-Jitsu, a role. We are simulating murder, basically. We're having this contest of a fight to the death, but nobody has to die because we can tap out first. We're essentially saying, you got me, okay, you're in a position where you can break my leg and then I'll be helpless and you can club me to death with your fists or whatever. Or you're in a position where you can strangle me unconscious and cut off the blood supply to my brain and I would die if you don't let go, so
All right, that's a win. It's a contest, it's a fight to the death, but nobody has to die. And that is really uncomfortable for a lot of people to accept, that somebody got the better of them, that they died, if you will, in that scenario. Because somehow we allow ourselves to translate that in our minds to, you are better than me, as opposed to, perhaps you're a better martial artist than me, or in that particular situation on that particular day, you got the better of me. Instead, it becomes this measuring contest of who's the better man. Nah. So yeah, give your teammate a call. See what's up with that. Hope he's okay. And yeah, in the future, as far as rolling with submissions, play a game of catch and release if they don't tap out. Just let go and try a different technique. If you're going for a leg lock, maybe the guy's standing over you, or you're working for a heel hook, you know you could get him, and he won't tap, just let go and sweep him instead. Then get on top, and then strangle him. The great thing about strangling, if they don't tap out, and you keep going, then they go to sleep, then let go. They probably won't remember being choked out. They usually don't. They're always like, what happened? Why is everybody staring at me? Where'd that other guy go? I totally had him. And then they're shocked to learn they didn't. Our next question comes from Peter Crowley. Peter Crowley actually has a number of questions. Let's see how many of these we can get through. First one says, how should I breathe during fight training? Okay, I would recommend get a double mouth guard. You might like the single, that's fine. If you like fighting, sparring with a single, that's fine. But get a double mouth guard for the purpose of training. You know those ones that have the little slit in between where you can only take shallow breaths, like right? And focus on taking shallow breaths. Breathe the way that you want to move. So, if you're punching, exhale violently the same way that you want to punch, with that same movement quality. Wear that double mouth guard when you do bag work, when you do some cardio, when you do some fight training, and get used to that short, shallow type of breathing. If you focus on in through the nose, out through the throat, or out through the diaphragm. Okay, it's kind of hard to convey that information in a video form, but breathe the way you want to move. All right, taking a lot of time with that question. Next one, our friend Peter says. Peter says he's probably done about 1,000 hours of grappling. About 99% of it has been with untrained people, but really strong people. And a small amount of it has been at a BJJ club where he just tends to overpower people because he's a pretty big guy and a pretty strong guy. And his question comes down to this. He says, has my mainly freestyle grappling experience made me a better fighter, or do I need to learn the textbook stuff and get professional tuition before I can consider myself a force to be reckoned with? Okay, sure, all experience will make you better. Right? Training with untrained people, yes, that'll make you better. Training with trained people, that'll make you better in a different way. And if you want to be the best that you can be, you need to expand your experience as much as possible and train with all kinds of different experience levels. So yeah, I would recommend, yes, get some professional training. Get some really good Jiu-Jitsu black belts to show you the ropes, to show you how to do it better. I had a student about your size, really, really big guy, really super strong guy, a guy who could just grab your head and squish you, a guy who could do things that seemed to defy leverage and logic, and he could just do it because he was so big and strong. And at first it was really difficult to teach him, because he was just like, well, I don't really need to, because I can just push you off, or I can just squish you, or I can grab your arm and wrench it, or whatever. So he didn't really need technique at that point in his life, until he did. until he went to this jiu-jitsu tournament and he competed in his own weight class against people his own size and his own strength who just happened to know a little bit more about jiu-jitsu, and he lost, and he was like, what just happened there? I'm not the big guy anymore, I'm normal. It was like Superman exposed to kryptonite or other super people, and so he's normal again. So yeah, there are other humans out there your size, sometimes some of them bigger, some of them stronger. And if you want to train to beat them in jiu-jitsu, you gotta train in jiu-jitsu. Alright, this last question, I'm gonna have to answer this fast. It comes from Ecan Manifest, because I gotta go pick up my kids from the school bus. But he says, a question for the coach, a question from a coach to a coach. He is a coach of martial arts himself. And he says, when teaching in a group situation, as it pertains to drilling a skill, when people break off into pairs to spar, how do you manage it? I've discovered everyone wants to be the coach, and everyone wants to be the coach and tell the lesser experienced partner how to do it. And often they're giving different advice than what I've just explained, versus just running the scenario. I shied away from it because I felt like it was turning into blind leading the blind. In our case, role-playing different situations with client interactions, etc. What is your advice on how to best help a group of people practice and drill for skill? When you always have different people at different levels in the same group without the correct way, as far as I see, getting skewed or watered down. Okay, yeah, that happens. I do see that happen. I had a group class the other day where I had a student who, she's been training for about a month, and there was a new student who came in that day for the first time, and they paired up to drill some jiu-jitsu technique. And the girl who's been training for about a month, obviously she doesn't have a firm and solid grasp of all of the technical aspects of this technique, but I could see her trying to coach her training partner. Like, well, you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and she was very, very confident about it. And I'm watching this thinking, okay, is everything perfect? No, absolutely not. Of course, she's making mistakes and saying things that aren't necessarily 100% correct, right? But she's doing her best to try to guide her new training partner through the sequence. So I'm watching. And a younger version of me might have stepped in there, no, that's not how it goes, you do it this way instead. But I'm watching. And she says something which is mostly true about what to do if this particular technique doesn't work. Which, they're not even doing it right yet, but she says something that's mostly true about what to do if it doesn't work. And so I decide I'm going to establish a relationship of trust with my students by basing what I'm about to say on something we already have in common. So I repeat what she has just said to her training partner, to the whole class. And I say, let's focus on this aspect for a minute. Just the good part, not all the other stuff that doesn't necessarily apply. And I said, just like she said, if this technique isn't working out for you, we have an alternative. And so I broke down the alternative, showed it to them, and they were like, okay, yeah. And suddenly some light bulbs clicked, and this girl felt like, okay, I have done something positive. I had a positive interaction with my coach. We're learning things here. Now, do I pat them all on the back and say everything you're doing is nice and wonderful all the time? No, sometimes you have to just step in and say that it's wrong. We need to fix this, right? But there are better, more diplomatic ways to say that resonate more with people. I had a question this last week from a guy who had a bit of a falling out with his coach over, whether or not to punch this way or that way. These knuckles or these knuckles with in his Muay Thai class. And it can create a rift because his coach was like, you're doing everything wrong. And so instead of going to try to resolve the problem with his coach, because the trust was lost at that point, he came to me instead looking for the answer. And I told him, go have that awkward conversation with your coach, basically. But what if his coach had approached it differently and said something like, I see you're using 3-knuckle contact. I don't. I use this because of this, this, and this. I would like you to give it a try. I think any of us could appreciate that. Whether we agree with it or not, we could appreciate it and say, all right, I can still respect you. I can still trust you as a coach because you respected me. And so instead of coming to me, this guy on the internet, who he's never met in real life, he could go to his coach and have that conversation and it wouldn't be awkward. But yeah, new students will be new students and they will go into coach mode. And I see this a lot during actual sparring. When one guy is losing, everybody sees this in jiu-jitsu gyms, especially when you have a guy who's a little bit more experienced and they start losing to the less experienced guy. They lose a position and then they'll go into coach mode and say, okay, now what you need to do here to finish this submission you're trying is grab this arm here and do this. And they're trying to help the guy out, to try to save face. It's a pride issue. It's a pride issue. It's a young man's ego or a young woman's ego, a young person's ego stepping in the way. And some people never grow out of that. Help your students grow by also growing. Ask yourself some important questions. Is what my students are doing a reflection of what I am doing? I knew a guy who was a bad coach. I'm just going to throw that out there. He was a bad coach. He was a bad guy. He was a straight up criminal. He would lie and he would steal and he would cheat and he would do all of these terrible things outside of the gym. And inside of the gym, he was a terrible role model to his students. And I met some of these students after his gym folded, because of course it did. And they came to my gym and they told me about the experience, and they told me about these guys who would pick up on his mannerisms. And they would see the bad example he set, and they would become bad students. Okay. Now, hold that thought.
Okay, where was I? Oh yeah, I went to pick up my kids from school 3 years ago, and I'm finally back. Man, that took a long time to finish answering this question. So where was I? There was this really bad dude who was teaching classes. He was a terrible example for his students. Some of his students ended up being big jerks themselves because they modeled their behavior after their role model. So as a coach, you have to ask yourself what's really important to you. Is it that everybody pays attention to you? Is it that everybody gets their technique just right? Or is there something above that that's even more important? Something I often think to myself as a coach is that if all I teach my students is how to punch and kick the right way, how to do arm bars and takedowns the right way, how to pass the guard, and that's the end of it, then I feel like I've failed them ultimately. Because there's a whole lot more going on between the coach-athlete relationship than simply a transfer of information. There should be. And that can go in a very destructive, negative way that can change people's lives for the worse, or it can go in a very positive, constructive way that can build people up and help them to solve their own problems without having to come to you and say, hey, coach, please tell us the right way to do it. Help facilitate the process of figuring stuff out on your own, using your own initiative. Cut the apron strings, my friend. You don't have to be there to nitpick for every little detail of every technique. It's martial arts after all. Martial arts is pragmatic. That means as soon as we lay hands on each other, we know what we need to work on. We know if it's going to work or not. We know if we have to go back to the drawing board and fix it. And if you're skipping that step, well, don't put that back in. All right, my friends, I hope you have enjoyed this edition of Q&A with the Coach, with a bunch of clips from over the years that have been stuck on my phone for a very long time. And I finally got around to putting them out to you. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.